If you talk to some comic book collectors who've collected a lot of books over the years, you'll know that storage will become an issue at one point. Like for me, I have about 4 to 5 thousand books. Not really sure what the exact count is at this point, but it's a lot, and it's also starting to become, a bit of a challenge in terms of organizing and storing and managing these books. So I want to talk a little more about this, as well as share some photos that were sent to me by some fellow collectors who watch this channel. I'm also going to do a short tour of my comic room just to kind of show you my setup and show you how I kind of store stuff. It's very modest, but one of the viewers has asked about this, so I thought I would kind of show, a little bit behind the scenes in terms of how I manage my comic books.
All right, let's take a closer look at my boxes, the stuff that you see in the background when I am filming my videos. So I do have a little bit of a mini display on the top here. I keep a couple comics on display, and I try to rotate them out, but I don't always remember to do that properly. And you can't really see these well in the background, but they are. A copy of Lassie with a beautiful painted cover, and this is a copy of Amazing Fantasy number 13, but this is actually a facsimile edition, and this was gifted to me, and I'm very thankful for that. So I do have a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff. That's actually Don Cherry action figure, who is a bit of a hockey celebrity in Canada, but certainly not the most politically correct person, but a popular figure from the past in terms of hockey. Behind that are actually some really cool beer can boxes that were also given to me as a gift, and so I thought those were pretty cool. I put them in the background, as well as a couple of those over there as in a postcard from Dallas, Texas. So thank you, Kyle, there. Some artwork done by my nieces, a little crochet little guy, as well as this happy clam figure that was also done by my niece. Little Homer Simpson Rubik's Cube. I recently went to Quebec and got a license plate. Kind of cool. Thanos, one of my favorite Marvel character figures, along with Ghost Rider, Punisher, Spider-Man, as well as Darth Vader in the background there, Groot. So my setup is that I generally do like publisher and sometimes kind of ages, and if it's a specific format, like I do keep my 100 pagers in like separate boxes, which would probably drive some people crazy, but and I do kind of label these, like these are Marvel A to G, Marvel M, and once these move around a bit, then I'll just take these off and put new ones. These are kind of recent pickups or my reading pile, so whatever I'm thinking about doing videos on will usually be up here. Recently, I did go to Quebec on a little vacation, and I picked up some really interesting French language comic books that were printed in Quebec, and these are black and white reprints, and I might do an episode on these someday in the future, but these were pretty cool, and these were published in the 1970s. So there's that. I did an episode recently on Louis Riel. That's that. As well as I also talked about Mile High in one of my previous episodes. This is actually an older Mile High Futures. If you ever ordered from Mile High a long time ago, you would be familiar with what these are. So there's that. A couple of homemade boxes, using my foot there. And a couple of, this is kind of overstock stuff, or stuff that I bought recently that I haven't really folded in yet, but I'm thinking about buying some more of these short boxes, and it would be nice to kind of go across, because over here, as you notice, the shelf only stops over here, and if I build it out a little further, then I can replace these guys and use short boxes, which would be a lot nicer. So I do have a few long boxes, and most of the stuff in here is like what I consider kind of more inferior stuff in my collection, or modern stuff or newer stuff. I do have another shelf up here, and this is where I have some extra supplies like backboards and bags. Not maybe the greatest use of this shelf, but it is what it is. I have a few more boxes over here, along with a couple of homemade boxes. If you have time, yeah, it's one way to save money, I suppose, but these do take a long time to make. And I have my press, which I've had for over a couple of years now. And if you're familiar at all with comic book pressing, it's been quite a thing to do, I suppose. And yeah, it does take a while to kind of learn how to use it well, but if you have a lot of comic books like myself, a lot of older comic books, you can certainly save a lot of money learning how to use a press properly. It's just a little work table here. So yeah, certainly not the most exciting comic book room by any means, but it's pretty well organized, which is important if you want to access your books regularly. And yeah, there you go.
I recently had a fellow collector send me some pictures of his custom-made cabinet for comic books, and I was really blown away at how well this was made. These custom cabinets are made to order, and he ordered it from a custom builder who specializes in making custom cabinets for comic books. The builder's name is Vinny, and he runs a shop called North Jersey Woodcraft. He has some example builds on his website and Instagram account, and I'll add these links to my video description for more details. These are not cheap, but if you have the money, wow, they do a wonderful job of storing your comic books. I have a few pictures from a viewer, Jimmy, who sent me some images of the boxes he's made himself, and I believe these are made out of cedar. And so I just kind of wanted to show if you are into woodworking and do have the capacity to do this kind of stuff, that you can really make some really nice boxes. I've also included a link to his Instagram so you can kind of check his work out as well too. I've watched a lot of videos of other people's comic book rooms as well as their storage solutions, and there's a lot of options out there. So thank you, Bob and Jimmy, for sharing some pictures in terms of like your boxes and your cabinets. It's really nice stuff, and I encourage other collectors to kind of especially if you have the money to kind of look at some of these really nice options, because your comic books are pretty precious to you.
So this is my main bookshelf of trade paperbacks and hardcovers. And on the top shelf, I keep kind of like the larger format ones. And actually, even up here, I keep my handful of Platinum Age books, just because these are kind of really awkward in terms of size. They don't fit in magazine boxes. So I have a handful of them, like 6 or 7 of them, and I keep them up there. I have the big EC hardcover formats. There's a grading guide here, some of the worn hardcovers, a bunch of other miscellaneous hardcovers, books that I really like, and embarrassingly, some of these are still in shrink because I haven't opened them up and read them, but on the most part, these have all been read. A few items of note. This Dead Man collection is really great. It's out of print, but it has the entire Neal Adams Dead Man series. These Dark Horse Tarzan reprints are really great if you can find them. Blazing Combat, which I think is the best war comic book that has ever been published. Daredevil, kind of like the artisan edition of Born Again. So yeah, it gives you an idea of the stuff that I like to read. On the next shelf, I've got more hardcovers. Some of these kind of like Golden Age reprints. I haven't really taken a deep look through some of these, but I got a lot of these like on the cheap, so I was pretty happy to get these inexpensively. I have a few of the old original Marvel graphic novels, Death of Captain Marvel, first and third print, as well as some other Marvel Masterworks. Something like, I don't know if I'm going to show this on the side here. This is kind of like Strange Tales reprints. These are pretty tight. And then a bunch of Marvel trade paperbacks. Frank Miller's Sin City, which I think is also excellent. and a few other like Alan Moore stuff, Fables 1001 Nights, and the DC Archive editions. So like Enemy A, Sergeant Rock, Sugar and Spike, great Sheldon Mayer stuff. And then on the next shelf down here, let's take a look. The great EC Red Book, photojournal guides, Jim Starlin Warlock, which is fantastic. This is kind of an art book of L.B. Cole's work from the Golden Age, which is fantastic. An absolute edition of Planetary, which is amazing. Kirby book, some other stuff that I really like. DC stuff, Sandman, Swamp Thing, a few other miscellaneous things like 100 Bullets, Batman, of course, Watchmen. I do have a bunch of trade paperbacks and hardcovers over here as well too. Now, these should be stored vertically. They shouldn't really be stored horizontally like this because it compresses the spine. So, but you know, I'm kind of low on space, so I figured, okay, this, and I have to go through some of these just to do a mini purge, just to get rid of some of these. So, yeah. And then I do actually even have stuff behind here hidden just because, you know, space is always at a premium. So I do have stuff even behind here, stuff that I don't maybe care so much about. And then even going down further here, you'll see, you know, all these Overstreet price guides from before and some other stuff that I like to read, more indie stuff like, you know, you've got, well, this is actually semi-Marvel, the Powers, which I thought was fantastic. Some other miscellaneous stuff like a Chester Brown trade, Swords of Cerebus, and some other stuff. So yeah, this is one of the bookshelves that hold some of my trade paperbacks and hardcovers. I do have one other mini bookcase to show with like digests and paperbacks that I've shown before in other videos. I do want to do a video on Kazuo Koike and Goseki Kojima's work, specifically Lone Wolf and Cub. This was kind of like the second series that came out, Samurai Executioner. I do have my extra supplies here, as well as some larger, thicker books that are not part of the bookshelf. A few board games. I also really like board games. I don't play as much as I used to, but these are extra boxes that I have. And more hardcovers, extra kind of reference material, and other trade paperbacks in here. So stuff like, that's actually a hockey book, but like stuff like Darwin Cook's series on Parker. These are Usagi Yojimbo, like what I call phone books. And these are originally old Overstreet updates that I still have, as well as a few other hardcovers. And there you go.
Now, I understand with many collectors, as they start to get older, they, you know, start to think about what their exit strategy is going to be with their comic books. And, you know, especially if you've amassed a lot of books. And, you know, while I thought about it, at the end of the day, you know, your comic books are there for you. And I still feel like I have a lot of years left in this hobby. So I'm not so concerned about that now. But one thing that I do every once in a while is I just give away comic books, you know, especially to younger people, kids, as long as they're age appropriate. And I think, you know, how I first started getting interested in comic books was that somebody just gave me some comic books at a birthday party and I got immediately hooked. So certainly, you know, it's one thing to kind of, you know, one way to kind of pass your interest on to others. Now, it may not always work, but, you know, if you get a few people, you know, interested in comic books, then who knows? It could become like a collector and, you know, somebody who's really enjoys comic books like yourself. One of my viewers, Kevin, recently made a comment which I thought was brilliant. And he said that comics make my world right again. And I can't think of, you know, any better words for comic books in terms of how you enjoy them. So, you know, keep that in mind. I think they're great words, certainly worth repeating. So thank you, Kevin, for that. If you enjoyed this video, you can watch another one of my videos over here. Until next time, read and enjoy your comic books.